for a quick little lunch break. And I really observe people when I'm in Palm Desert and in a 55 and older community and observing how people move and what are their struggles. Well, we'll look at AMPK pathway versus mTOR and how that impacts the aging process, but really looking at what are people doing now to improve how they age. When they are 80, why are they struggling? Why do we have cognitive decline? What are the correlations here? What I've observed is maybe it's the generation, but most people don't lift weights, and most people are not walking each day and moving throughout the day as they age. And what they're eating is not the required protein and the source of protein to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. So we talk about sarcopenia and loss of muscle as we age. We're more frail. Maybe people have more risk for falling. And if you fall and break a bone, you have a fracture, as in your hip, the outcomes are not very good. And we want to live a long, quality life, happy life. And I think a lot of that, what I see happening, at least from my perspective over here, we need to prioritize protein. And what once worked doesn't do the same. I need to have twice as much protein. And not all proteins equal. So you need to look at what is your source of protein. And thinking that at least 100 grams a day, we should get of protein with the right essential amino acid profile, hitting that leucine threshold we've talked about, and really thinking of what am I eating? How am I breaking it down? Do I need digestive support to break my food down? And how am I absorbing the nutrients? So listen to my podcast I did on cognitive health, chronic stress, and H. pylori, and looking at, all right, am I eating in a rested state? So it's not just what we eat, but how we break it down. We have to eat in a parasympathetic state. So being focused, being mindful, being in that rest and digest nervous system state to have the rest of the processes for proper digestion to function at optimal level. Now, what happens, a lot of us, I know I do, I have to take a moment to slow down and breathe instead of rushing. We rush, 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 and getting the food in properly, not inhaling it. So starting with how you eat, sitting, taking 3 deep breaths in and out, calm down, making sure we're focused on eating and prioritizing protein in our meal. But the next step is when you eat, cut your food up, chew your food. Ideally, we're supposed to chew 20, 30 times, which most people never do. And make sure we have enough digest enzymes and the right acidity in our stomach. So that happens first before digestive enzymes, but making sure we're properly breaking that protein down into usable amino acids. A lot of us do not have enough stomach acid, so we may need to supplement with something as HCl betaine or a good source of digestive enzymes that contain some enzymes help break protein down and the HCl betaine in there. So there's options, but we want to make sure we don't have signs and symptoms and test for elevated H. pylori. So it gets complicated. So it's not just what we eat, nutrient-dense foods, prioritizing a protein using something as Dr. Gabrielle Lyon talks about, the 1 gram of protein per pound of ideal body weight, or at least 100 grams a day. And then hitting that protein goal, spreading it through the day. For sure, breakfast and dinner, we have the highest amount, and then your midday. So I call it meal 1, meal 2, meal 3, because I might not eat at dinner time or at lunchtime. I eat when I'm hungry or when I'm able to eat on a work day. So thinking of planning ahead, what does that meal look like? How do I need to create a 40 to 50 gram protein meal for my first meal, second meal? I just ate just now and actually had sliced turkey and a Swiss cheese with some stone ground mustard, did a little roll up, and I had a slice of cooked bacon and had that in a roll up. It was really good. And knowing how much protein is in each. So I need to have so many of those to make it hit my quota of the 40, 50 grams of protein from animal sources, ideally. If we do plant-based, we have to do a little more creative planning to hit the right essential amino acids, or you add in some essential amino acids. Now, note that one egg is 6 grams of protein. So if your typical meal one or your breakfast is an egg and maybe half avocado, well, that's 6 grams. That's far from 40 to 50 grams. So we need to figure out what to do to add in more protein and how to combine foods. So that's something to think about as we work on improving the aging process. And that's more mTOR versus today we're talking about the AMPK pathway to improve our fat metabolism, fat oxidation, and that's occurring in the mitochondria. So mitochondria function, and hopefully we can talk about oxidative stress as well and how that impacts everything. So let me bring on Dr. Kyle and we'll talk shop. Stay tuned on YouTube for upcoming videos. I do have Dr. Nathan Patel coming on the show to talk about mitochondria, Dr. Patel, and we'll talk about the me scan. And he actually lives near me, so I'm hoping we can do a Pinoe metabolism test, check mitochondria function, and correlate that data with some functional labs and his me scan. So super excited for that coming up next week. All right, I will bring on Dr. Kyle. Okay, Dr. Kyle Smith, welcome to my podcast to dive into metabolic health markers and all fun things, mitochondria and oxidation and all my favorite topics.
Well, thank you for having me, and I am totally excited to be here.
Yeah, we have a mutual friend. My friend Larry connected me with you, and you did a seminar with Pinoe on their metabolism testing, and that led Larry connecting back to me about using some supplements we tested on fat oxidation, resting metabolic rate, and our exercise metabolism. And so it's like, wow, I got to connect with Dr. Kyle and talk about this and really dive into this subject, as we were just talking before we hit record, how we are on a similar mission to improve how we age and to be fit and healthy from the inside out at a cellular level. And I think even athletes are not so healthy and really
Hmm.
learning what we can do now to be our best self in the future. So I'm really on a mission to be in my prime when I'm 70, 80, and not be in my prime when I'm, what do they say, 30, 40 or in your prime. I feel like we
Right.
should be able to be amazing when we're 70, 80, so we can go do all the stuff that we've been wanting to do. And my friend called it the go-go years and go travel and all that. But, anyway, so we have lots to talk about. So talk about what your purpose is, your passion, what you do.
Okay, first of all, if I may, every client that comes to see you and runs the Pinoe test, that is the most amazing gift and service you can give someone. I mean, I want your audience to know Pinoe, I think you've probably shared before, means breath in Greek because it's
Mhm.
basically a Greek company and an apparatus. But at the end of the day, with that, you can dive into 23 markers into metabolic health. And some of them are critically important, as we're going to see in this presentation today. They're critically important for aging, healthy aging, manifesting energy, having better health outcomes. In doctors' practices, doctors are looking for what they call better health outcomes. And that means you look better, feel better, age slower,
Yeah.
and hopefully you don't have disease. And if disease ever happens at the very end of your life, it doesn't happen in the last 20 years. It's
Yeah.
crunched to the very, very, very end. So those are having better health outcomes. And the Pinoe allows you to drill in. And I know you know this, but I want your audience to know this. It allows you to drill into what's happening metabolically. And then the magic is you can put that individual on something that's customized just for them. Because it's like looking at the gauges on your automobile, right? You've looked at these 7 different gauges. Now you can customize exactly what this individual needs for their health. And therefore, you can promote and create optimal health through what you're doing. So for that reason and many others, since I've listened to your podcast, I'm excited to be here.
Yes, I appreciate that. I realized I bought Pinoe metabolism testing equipment 2 years ago, and it's shocking to me how challenging it is to grow that business, because I would think Peter Attia's influence on the world and Hooverman and all these people would give people more motivation, especially in San Diego, where people are a little bit healthier. down here, but it's pretty amazing how people don't understand the importance of testing and figure out how to fuel, how to train. Am I efficient at burning fat? Do I need what we'll talk about, AMPK versus mTOR? I mean, you don't know what you don't know. If we can
Right.
test these simple tests, I think, I don't know if it's intimidating people. That's why I would say it's not necessarily the O2 max. Let's just find your peak fat burning zone. That's,
Right.
the rest of it doesn't matter to me sometimes.
Well, it's such an awesome tool. So I'm glad we get to talk about that. That's weaved into this presentation. So you asked me kind of like what my focus is and my passion is.
Yes.
I love teaching doctors about metabolic health, and we're going to talk about what that is exactly. But for the last 10 years, I've traveled across the country and provided continuing education programs to doctors, medical doctors, DOs, chiropractors, naturopaths, where they get CE credit, continuing education credit to see me talk. And hopefully, if I do a good job, in that 1 hour lecture or 2 or 4 hour typically lecture, I can show them how to heal, help, and serve more patients utilizing nutrition in their practice. And the good news is more and more doctors are interested in what they can do in this natural health category. But the emerging issue is actually buried in this presentation today, and that is metabolic health. People are not as healthy as they even think they are right now. We've got this crisis happening right now. It's like a tidal wave that's coming right now with regards to metabolic health. And if individuals like you and I don't help people see that, they're going to get caught in the tsunami in a bad way. So at the end of the day, I'm excited to be here so we can share that metabolic health message.
Yeah, well, I don't know, maybe it's in your slides, but can you give us a summary or definition of metabolic health in your own
Okay, so
words?
it's really important to stick to the whole presentation, but
Yeah,
the
okay.
main
I'll
part
let
is
you
this.
start.
Yeah, well, it turns out, as you're going to see in the peer-reviewed scientific research literature very recently, researchers have started to identify that insulin starts to go up about 10 years before fasting blood
Mhm.
glucose. And the problem with that is it's silent. In a doctor's practice, the doctor's focused on fasting blood glucose. So if you're 95, you're fine, go home, eat a Twinkie. Kidding about the Twinkie part. But
Yeah.
they'll say, fine, go home, don't worry about anything. The reality is they're not asking the question, how much insulin does it take to produce that 95 fasting blood glucose? And for every individual, it will be different. And I happen to be one at 61 years of age where my insulin was way exaggerated. I had way too much insulin to produce the healthy glucose. Yes, my blood glucose monitor, continuous blood glucose monitor says I was waking up in my 90s. So yay, happy. But my insulin, 4 times higher than it should have been to produce that result. So at the end of the day, that's a problem with aging because insulin puts its foot, so to speak, on the accelerator of aging. It ages every organ, gland, tissue, and system in the human body at an accelerated rate. So you want to pull insulin down, and that is metabolic health, because if insulin stays up and glucose is normal, guess what goes up next? Triglycerides. Well, guess what goes up after that? Blood pressure.
Mhm.
According to Dr. Robert Lustig, a medical doctor with a book behind me, the last thing to go up is glucose. And he says, when glucose goes up, the horse is out of the barn and the barn is on fire. So at the end of the day, you don't want that. You don't want the barn on fire, right? So pulling insulin down is actually pretty easy with diet, exercise, and nutrition prior to glucose going up. After glucose goes up, you can still do it, but it almost takes a heroic effort. So at the end of the day, you and I, all healthcare practitioners, we want to catch people with the high insulin way before glucose starts to go up. And that's metabolic health. That's ultimately what we'll be talking about today.
Well, good. I'll let you start presentation, but I must add, I did a blog post I wrote a couple of years ago that I'm probably the only one that reads it. Said, should we redefine what metabolic health markers are? Because the
Yes,
markers on there didn't have insulin.
right.
And, it just was like, why are we looking at these? Don't even make sense to me. We should be looking at for sure insulin. And I get so frustrated if you saw my reaction to that because it's never, I go crazy that it's not tested in our regular checkup. And it costs so little
I
to get
know.
done. As
Yes.
I'm actually going to get lab work done tomorrow. And insulin's like $20 to add
Yeah.
on. So it's just frustrating. Okay, so let's share your slides so I don't jump ahead and ask questions that you will cover.
All right. So today we're going to be talking about AMPK, and we'll talk about what that is in a second. But before we get into it, we are talking about a product technology, but we're really not going to focus on the product technology. We're going to focus on the AMPK story. But weaved into this is kind of I've been told a cute story because I created a product for my wife. And the significance there is they say it was a love story because I created the product, for my wife. But
Our love.
ultimately, I practiced clinical nutrition for more than 30 years. I invented a product that totally by accident became #1 in its category and held that for 10 years. It was America's best-selling brain health supplement. As I shared, I travel across the country and teach doctors how to use nutrition in practice. So one evening, my wife said to me, my children, by the way, weren't at dinner this night. She says to me, "Hey, Mr. Dr. Genius, if you're so smart, why don't you create a product that'll help me burn fat?" Right?
Mm.
And I'd never created or invented a product that burnt fat. I've patented and created multiple products in the past, but never in this category. And I said, "Darling, that's because that'd be hard to do. If there was a Barnes and Noble and you went into the weight loss section, how many books would there be? Hundreds, right? And
Yeah.
many of them have different opinions. Some of them are opposed to each other. High carb, low fat, high fat, low carb, all this kind of stuff. So at the end of the day, I had never done that in 30 years. But the cool part is she asked me that question in a time in my life where I had the time to go mull around and peer-reviewed research in the National Library of Medicine, which is pubmed.gov, and to ask the question. And this is the question: why are some people's metabolisms high and why are some people's metabolisms low? For example, Kathy's my best friend, my soulmate. When I met her, she was 17 and my knees got weak. I asked God to make her my wife, and luckily for me, he did. But at the end of the day, this has been my soulmate. And in 30 years, I watched her struggle with weight loss. She would gain it and lose it and gain it and lose it, but almost always she'd gain it right back, especially after she had our second child. It was really hard for her to lose weight. And the crazy thing is I saw her do everything right, like you would think would happen in a healthcare practitioner's household. We ate really well, right? We ate quality food, organic food. We didn't eat processed food. She would exercise like an athlete. She'd run 5 miles. But still, if she ate food like a normal human, like a mortal, like the rest of us, she would gain fat. So the question I thought I would ask was, and by the way, this matures, why do some people have a high metabolism and some people have a low metabolism? Why in practice do I see women and men that seem like they can eat anything they ever want and they never gain weight, and somebody else can eat a saltine cracker, drink a glass of water, and gain 10 pounds? Why is that? So I went for that question, the answer to that question, and I found this enzyme. Your audience probably knows it, but people always ask me in an audience, what does AMPK stand for? So I'll say it now. It stands for, listen to this mouthful, 5' adenosine monophosphate activated protein kinase. That's when you know you need an abbreviation, right?
Yes.
But I saw an article that told me that this is a key enzyme that operates in every organ, gland, tissue, and system in the human body, except for one exception, red blood cells. And it is the energy sensor in that cell. It actually controls metabolism and metabolic flexibility. And there's a lot packed into that sentence. Metabolism, it determines if your metabolism's high or if it's low. And metabolic flexibility, it determines what fuel your body's burning. Is it going to burn carbs and sugar? Is it going to burn body fat and ketones ultimately? So it makes fuel decisions. It makes metabolism decisions. As a matter of fact, the first paper that I read on this subject was this one, top left-hand quadrant of the screen. Listen to the title that the researchers gave this: AMPK, Guardian of Metabolism and Mitochondrial Homeostasis. Now, guardian is like you're the guardian of a child. If you're in a doctor's office, you're making all the decisions for that child because you're the guardian, right? This is guardian of metabolism. It's going to make literally all the metabolic decisions, and it's in charge of mitochondrial homeostasis. And you've mentioned this in your podcast. It will induce mitophagy, so your body can get rid of old dysfunctional mitochondria, which is key because those are usually the ones creating the oxidative stress. And it's in control of mitochondrial biogenesis, formation of new healthy mitochondria. So it'll take out the bad ones and bring in the good ones. That's mitochondrial balance, homeostasis. The next one is it can restore metabolic balance over space and time. This next paper that I saw, the role of AMPK-mediated pathways in autophagy and aging. Autophagy, you've talked about this on your podcast, is the body's ability to go throughout and do what you would call cellular surveillance and delete and get rid of the old dysfunctional cells. Now think of if that was interrupted, if your body couldn't get rid of old dysfunctional cells, what they become? Diseased cells, right? So at the end of the day, autophagy is your body's ability to get rid of dysfunctional cells. The beautiful part is if the individual is nourished, well nourished, and an old cell goes out, a new cell is born into that environment that's nourished. It's a healthy cell. So ultimately, it has everything to do with healthy aging. And the big one, You look at the date of this next paper, 2024. That's as recent can get.
Yeah.
They're calling AMPK a promising target against aging and neurodegenerative diseases or neurodegenerative disorders. So at the
Mm.
end of the day, it can protect our brain, it can protect our body. It's intertwined into healthy aging, and it's intertwined into the fuel that your body burns. So at the end of the day, AMPK is something that we want to go for, but as you've mentioned in your podcast, it's something you want to have in balance. You don't want to have too much or too little. You called it the Goldilocks principle, right? You don't want it to be too hot, too high, or too low. You want it to be just right. But the key is most people are lacking AMPK in adequate quantities today. And the reason is at the top of this screen. This is the
Mm.
big one. Now, recently, because of RFK, people are talking about this all the time. But
Mhm.
a year ago, 2 years ago, when I talked to patients or you talk to your clients or patients about processed foods, they probably looked at you like, what? You're going to take all the fun out of my life? Really? I can't have potato chips? Well, at the end of the day, a diet high in sugar, fructose, processed food spikes insulin. And here's a key to our talk from now on. If insulin goes up, AMPK goes down. They're like a seesaw.
Mm.
They're inversely proportional. So if
Mhm.
one side of the seesaw is high, which is in this case insulin, the other side is low, that's AMPK. So putting this in layperson speak, if you eat a jelly donut, all the sugar and carbs in that donut spike your blood sugar, insulin goes up. And if insulin goes up, AMPK goes down. So a diet high in sugar, fructose, processed foods will stop, limit, or interrupt AMPK. The next one is the next reason for low AMPK is genetics. And here's a fun one. Some people have a genetic predisposition to high AMPK function. Some have a genetic predisposition to low AMPK function. We know that, right? But the interesting thing
Mhm.
is, which one do you think is a survivor gene?
Mm.
The individuals with the low AMPK function. And the reason
Mm.
being is if you could get in a time machine and go into a human community like 2,000 years ago in a really harsh winter, if the community or the household failed to provide enough food to last through the long winter, and let's say winter was harsher and longer than they thought, the skinny little human didn't make it through the winter. It was the plumped up, overweight, fat individual, if you will, that had enough body fat that as long as they could get to
Mm.
water, they could make it through into the spring. So
Right.
having low AMPK function is a genetic predisposition to be a survivor. So think of this. If you're
Mm.
overweight, if you always had trouble with being overweight, that's a survivor gene. The problem is look at the top of the screen again. When that survivor gene meets processed foods, which was never, ever in the whole history of evolution of humans, right? That's the problem because insulin gets spiked all the time and the body was not created for that.
Mm.
Now, the next one, bottom right-hand quadrant of the screen says AMPK decreases with age. But I say to you, and I know you're going to get this because it's probably your spiel too, does it really? Because if you
Yeah.
take a look at the top of the screen, a diet high in processed sugar and carbs, and then the bottom left-hand quadrant of your screen, lack of any exercise at
Mhm.
all, heck fire, of course it declines because our activity decline and we eat more junk as we age. I can't tell you how many older patients I've seen that would eat for dinner cereal, right? Oh,
Yep.
I had a bowl of cereal for dinner. Really? You can't, you and I were going to be on the same page on that, right? You can't do that.
Yes,
A diet high
exactly.
in processed carbs and lack of intense exercise, of course, you're going to think it decreases with age, but it's just activity decreased with age. So look at the next one, lack of intense exercise. We're going to talk about this in more detail, but it's actually intense exercise that stimulates the best AMPK function. I think any exercise is good. They've shown right now a walk after dinner is good for your insulin sensitivity, right? But if we're
Mhm.
trying to activate AMPK, it takes intense exercise. And then the big cajon on the left-hand quadrant of the screen, there are chemicals in the environment like glyphosate. There are drugs, 29 prescription drugs, and alcohol all stop AMPK in its tracks. So if you have a genetic predisposition to poor AMPK function and at the top of the screen, you're eating processed foods like the charcuterie board with all the crackers, and then on the left-hand quadrant of your screen, you're drinking alcohol, your AMPK is turned off, right? However, interestingly, when we see such variability in individuals, if you have a genetic predisposition to high AMPK function, and bottom left-hand quadrant of your screen, you're exercising with intensity every day, probably left-hand quadrant of your screen, you could drink a couple glasses of wine and not have a problem with it at all. That's why we see such variability from person to person. So there's multiple reasons for low AMPK, but the problem is the way we live in this country in this standard American diet, SAD, right, acronym, at the end of the day, we're pushing AMPK down and we're pushing insulin up. So now these three that just went to orange, they coalesce together. The bad diet, the genetics, and the lack of exercise to create this next slide, which should absolutely rock your world and your viewers' world if they're not familiar with it. This paper was published in 2023. That's about as recent can get. Insulin's a major metabolic switch. Right now, I'm being the guide. I'm showing you and your viewers and listeners what's in the peer-reviewed research. This paper states, not me, but them, they state 93% of American adults are metabolically unhealthy. 93. Not maybe what we would have guessed, 60% or 70%, because 70% are overweight. They say 93%. That means just 7% have good metabolic health. And that means 1 in 3 Americans have metabolic syndrome, and they don't know it. And that means they're on the D-train to diabetes land. They're headed there right now. They're already on the train. The train has left the station. So at the end of the day, insulin's a major metabolic switch. Now, the surprise here, top left-hand quadrant of your screen, that means if we're pulling fasting insulin, it's 93% are going to blow high on that, so to speak. They're going to have high insulin levels. And that's a big problem because, ready? Hyperinsulinemia, which means too much insulin in the blood, accelerates aging. You're putting your foot on the accelerator of aging. So look at the first bullet, and it's in quotes because it's in this paper. Nutritionally driven insulin exposure controls the rate of mammalian aging. Pause on that and think of what that really means. It means that banana pudding, probably not a good idea, right? Now, I don't mean we can't have fun every once in a while, but at the end of the day, we don't want to be spiking insulin. We want insulin to be in the healthy range or below the healthy threshold. Look at the next bullet. It gets worse. In one recent study, half of the 4,485 subjects showed hyperinsulinemia despite normal glucose clearance, suggesting that hyperinsulinemia likely occurs as a silent disease in a substantial proportion of an otherwise healthy population. Not the people you think are sick. We're talking healthy people manifesting high insulin, but like I said at the beginning in the introduction, their glucose is normal. So this takes us to the bottom right-hand quadrant of the screen. The note on the left, there's this new model of hyperinsulinemia, and it's the bottom right-hand quadrant of your screen. If you take a look, insulin spikes first, insulin resistance comes on second, and glucose comes up last. So if you're pulling blood in that normal window or the pre-diabetes window, glucose looks fine, but you're headed straight to diabetes because insulin is high. What happens is insulin goes up, and here's something to remember. Insulin's actually the bully on the playground. Of everything we're going to talk about today, it's more powerful than Motor, more powerful than AMPK, more powerful than all these healthy genetic messaging systems you're going to see in the human body in just a moment. So at the end of the day, it's the bully on the playground. As you see, it goes up first. We become insulin insensitive or resistant because now your cells are going, stop, I can't feed anymore. Don't send me any more glucose. Don't send me any more fatty acids. They say stop, and they reduce the receptors on the cell to decrease the insulin signal. So now it takes more insulin to get the cell to respond. And that's a terrible vicious cycle because the body produces more insulin, and then it breaks. And when it breaks, you're into diabetes. So the good news, if I can share some right now, and it sounds like I should, right? Is you can pull back the insulin as long as you get to it before the blood glucose goes up. You can still pull it back if glucose is high, but the earlier is always the better in this scenario. So this is what we said in the beginning, or what I said. I want everyone to be asking the question on the bottom right-hand quadrant of the screen. How much insulin does it take to produce normal fasting blood glucose? So I have a little story. An individual that allowed me today to share this story with you, with all your listeners and your viewers. His name is Eric. He comes to me, he's fatigued and tired, and he's in chronic pain. Eric happens to be very significantly overweight in the midsection. And as you know, that's a big problem because all of that body fat around the gut for a man, they call it central adiposity, that's metabolically active. So it tells me Eric's testosterone is probably low because he's spinning testosterone into estrogen. I don't know that yet. But at the end of the day, Eric's overweight in front of me, fatigued, tired, and in chronic pain. And by the way, those are all intertwined. It turns out Eric is going to his medical doctor in about 2 weeks for his annual physical. And I said, hey, while you're there, have your doctor pull your fasting insulin. So he comes back in a couple of weeks. He gives me all his paperwork and everything's there but the fasting insulin. I say, Eric, because that's the one thing I'm interested in right now, right? Eric, where's the fasting insulin? And he says, oh, medical doctor said that wasn't necessary because I don't have a history of diabetes. And by the way, his fasting blood glucose was exactly 95. So I thought to myself, this is an opportunity to look really smart. Eric, we're going to pull your insulin. It's only $28 retail, at least where we order it for the patient, $28. Doctor's price is half that. And by the way, anyone listening, they can go to directlabs.com. I don't know if you've ever used that resource.
Yeah.
You can go to directlabs.com and pull your blood without having a doctor's requisition. So you go to Direct Labs and they'll show you how to do that. But at the end of the day, we pulled his fasting insulin. It comes back in a week, and Eric's is, drum roll, 41 micro international units per milliliter. 41.
Wow.
Now look at the top left-hand quadrant of your screen. Healthy fasting insulin is 2 to 5. Bottom left-hand quadrant of your screen, research has correlated fasting levels over 7 as being associated with significant increase in future risk of metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes. I know it's corny. I know it's corny, but that's why I say Eric is on the D train to diabetes land, and the train has practically left the station, right? He's headed there. So my sole thing now is, how do I bring Eric's insulin down? By the way, Eric is the same thing as Kathy. It turned out in our household, Kathy looked like she had normal blood glucose numbers via glucose monitor. We pulled her insulin to find out it was exaggerated high. Not as high as Eric's. This is the highest I've ever seen, but it was high. So these two stories are intertwined. By the way, when insulin goes up, your body's perception of change pain goes down. It's called nociception. Nociceptive fibers get activated, making it easier to have shoulder pain, hip pain, back pain. So any individual that has a really good mattress, but yet you still wake up with pain everywhere, you need to be thinking about insulin. Anytime sleep is disrupted, you need to be thinking about insulin. So I'm thinking about insulin for Eric. And by the way, another tidbit, if insulin is high, testosterone is low. They're also always inversely proportional.
And
So,
cortisol?
oh, by the way, that's the beginning of the story. The very top, if you live stressed, right? If cortisol goes up, insulin sensitivity goes down, which means insulin goes up. So when cortisol is up, insulin's up, and testosterone is in the tank. This book behind me somewhere, The Testosterone Switch, I wrote that book. And for 10 years, I taught doctors how to double, triple, or quadruple testosterone in otherwise healthy men. And it's all done with diet, exercise, and nutrition. And it's all focused on cortisol and insulin. And you've been mentioning these kind of things in your podcast. So the bottom line is, this is the toughest slide we're going to get through, but you like to dive deep. So I put this in there so we could go down this rabbit hole. Are you ready?
I love it. Yes.
All right. So genetics and lifestyle coalesce together and to create elevated insulin concentrations and insulin resistance. And as I put there in the flag, high insulin opposes all the benefits of AMPK, autophagy, healthy aging, neurodegenerative disease. All the protective factors of AMPK go away in the presence of hyperinsulinemia, which means too much insulin in the blood or elevated insulin concentrations. So sticking on that left-hand quadrant of the screen, if insulin goes up, and you've said this in one of your podcasts, lipolysis gets cut off. That's your body's ability to burn fat for fuel. Lipolysis gets cut off, but lipogenesis goes up. That's your body's ability to take that white rice you ate and turn it right into body fat, right? Excess carbs go into body fat. That, of course, increases obesity, and that causes increased age-associated disease risk. If you go down the middle, this is a huge part of our talk. Every time insulin goes up, mTOR is activated. Goes up every time. Insulin triggers mTOR. Insulin triggers mTOR. Now, we know when you exercise, you're triggering mTOR. But at the end of the day, the problem right now in this cycle is mTOR becomes dominant because AMPK is suppressed in people that have hyperinsulinemia. Now, if they don't have hyperinsulinemia, if they're the athletes that you test and work on, they're going to have normal glucose clearance, normal insulin levels, and metabolic flexibility. But right here, if mTOR is jacked up and FOXOs, by the way, are reduced, you have cell senescence, which means aging of all your cells. FOXOs are a whole series of healthy genetic messages that have to do with endogenous antioxidant production and decreasing inflammation. So now antioxidant status goes down, inflammation goes up, and now in the middle of the screen, you've got a decrease in autophagy. We talked about that. An increase in protein synthesis, a decrease in protein turnover, an increase in protein aggregates, mitochondrial stress, cell senescence, all coalescing into increased age-associated disease risk. So we have a
Mm.
motor problem in individuals that have high insulin. In the right-hand quadrant of your screen, you have a reduction in nitric oxide synthase, and that means vascular tone goes up, which ultimately means you have high blood pressure. And another
Mm.
sidebar there for men, especially in men, they have trouble with erectile function because
Yeah.
that member does not vasodilate anymore. If nitric oxide synthase is cut out, then they have trouble activating that because nitric oxide has to be present. So interestingly, if that's not
Mm.
working well, it's a pretty good indication that insulin is high and insulin resistance is set in. And that will, again, happen way before fasting blood glucose goes up. So at the end of the day, right-hand quadrant of the screen, elevated insulin levels drive age-associated diseases in humans. Just tiny, modest increases in insulin concentrations suppress lipolysis and promote lipogenesis and obesity. Hyperinsulinemia activates mTOR, which in the context of less FOXO drives the cells right into senescence and death. And ultimately, insulin resistance impairs endothelial nitric oxide synthase, limiting vascular relaxation. So at the
Mm.
end of the day, we have an absolute, complete, utter train wreck happening with hyperinsulinemia. So what's the solution? Woo!
Mm.
Man, let's get to some good news. It's so heavy, right? Kyle,
Yeah.
I'm getting depressed. Okay, so the solution is actually AMPK. On the left-hand quadrant of your screen, it's always true. If insulin is high, AMPK is low. If you eat that jelly donut, blood sugar goes up, insulin goes up, AMPK goes down. But interestingly, the seesaw goes the other way too. Anything that boosts AMPK, anything, decreases insulin because AMPK is the master of resetting insulin sensitivity. It improves your body's sensitivity to insulin. If your body's sensitive, it needs a whole lot less. Great example, maybe a terrible example, actually. I have a son that's 23 years of age. I bet you he could eat a whole large pizza, drink a liter of soda pop. His blood sugar spikes for an hour and he comes back down to normal. But if his dad at 61 tried that, first of all, I'd probably be sick. But I
Mhm.
know because I have almost tested this, but not exactly. My blood sugar is going to go up and stay up for hours, and my insulin's going to be up the next day, right? So the difference is glucose clearance. And everything you talk about is
Mm.
improving glucose clearance, including insulin sensitivity. And the cool part is you can measure it actually with the Pinoe device, and we'll talk about that in a second. So there are actually more than this, but there are three major ways to increase AMPK and lower insulin. The first foremost one is the one you focus on the most, and that is exercise. Any form of exercise will improve insulin sensitivity, but intense exercise to fatigue or exhaustion will boost AMPK, and it'll boost it through the stratosphere. So as an example, jump squats, if a person's healthy enough to do that, and if they do it in a HIIT manner, high intensity interval training to fatigue or failure, that will send a whole body AMPK response. AMPK goes up in the brain and everywhere in the human body. It's a signal. So at the end of the day, exercise is your best way to get there. The second
Mm.
best way to get there that got really popular, but now it's bouncy, right? Is fasting. And this is why it's bouncy. I can tell you in practice, if you put some people on a fasting program and they're not metabolically flexible, they will hate you. They will quit
Mhm.
because blood sugar goes down. They get hangry, right?
Mhm.
And you don't recognize it if you're metabolically flexible. You don't recognize the kind of cravings they have. They have core survival cravings kicking in. Crackers, crackers, something to get the blood sugar up. Orange juice, something, right? So at the end of the day, they're hating the physician because their body can't toggle out of sugar burn into fat burn. So at the end of the
Mhm.
day, this is where, to me, the Pinoe device comes in, and it's so critically
Mhm.
important, is
Mhm.
measuring whether or not your patient is metabolically flexible. Because if they're having trouble metabolizing body fat, you don't put them on a fasting program, not right now. Now you can in the future, but you got to ease into it with exercise and fasting mimetics. So at the end of the day, fasting is a double-edged sword. Like me, I have to say, and for you, for Larry that you tested, we're all metabolically flexible, right? We can move into burning body fat. I can go for a half a day and not eat and be okay. You know what I mean? At the end
Yeah.
of the day, that's because my body can access body fat. The Pnoe device can definitively tell you if that's your patient or not, and then give you the ability to empower them with a program that will work for them And then when they break into burning body fat, now Katie bar the door. You've got a whole lot of things you can do with them to help improve their metabolic. The key here to also is with the Pnoe device, and I think I'm probably telling your story right now. If in fact they're not burning body fat for fuel, it's definitive that they have dysfunctional mitochondrial health because the mitochondria, they need metabolic flexibility to be healthy. Most people with high insulin, or rather, I have to say it most definitively, all people with high insulin are stuck in carb burn, can't move into fat burn.
Mhm.
So with your Pnoe device, if you're only seeing healthy people, you're not going to see this. But when you start to see average people that are eating the standard American diet, and for some reason now they're motivated to make a change, you'll see a whole lot of metabolically stuck people. And that, of course, was Eric, and it was my Kathy. So what do? We can use what's called exercise and fasting mimetics to help activate AMPK. So this is where the product technology comes in. These are phytonutrients, natural polyphenols from plants that are there that when you consume them, your body thinks you just exercised or it thinks you just fasted. That's why they call them mimetics. The word mimetics in science means mimickers. So exercise and fasting mimetics are natural polyphenol ingredients that boost AMPK. So I ask now the simple question, what are the best ones? What are the best polyphenol ingredients to activate AMPK? And for my product, I selected 7, my favorite 7. Quercetin, curcumin, berberine, resveratrol green tea, L-theanine, and moringa leaf, and I put them in liposomes to help enhance absorption. And what we have is a product called Avere Trim. And the phytonutrients that are inside Trim promote metabolic flexibility, aid in the healthy inflammatory response. They improve insulin sensitivity and support healthy blood sugar and energy levels and help with daily detoxification. So in creating the formula, we used a little device called a lumen. Have you talked
Yeah.
about this with
Oh,
your
yeah. It's on
audience?
my front of my videos. Yes, I think
Okay.
it's great day-to-day testing.
Okay, well, Kathy happens to be the most metabolically stuck patient I've ever seen, really. So when we started working on prototypes of the formula, we used the lumen and we adjusted the formula until it moved the lumen for her. Then I happened to have a whole network of doctors, as you could imagine, and I had about 12 of them try the product to see if we could duplicate the results. And when we had a formula that caused the lumen to light up for everybody, then I knew I had the right formula. So this is one of the doctor's experiences. If you can see, the lumen says they're in a number 1. This Dr. Carol, she says, I've been dieting for a month and my lumen showed a complete stall where every day I'd start the day in total carb burn. Then I took just 1 packet of trim and shot down to a 1 in total fat burn. Woo woo. So this is what we did. We utilized the lumen. Now, I don't know if you know this part, but the folks at Pnoe did a test for us on this product. In one group of 12 individuals, they had everyone exercise at moderate intensity for 20 minutes with no trim. And the next day, they gave them 1 packet of trim. I would have liked to seen 2, by the way, but they gave them 1 packet
Yeah.
of trim and did the same moderate intensity for 20 minutes. And this is what they said. The crossover point was significantly delayed in every single person. Every individual, all 12 of them, had an improvement in fat burn during exercise. So this is the real origin of this trim product. I created it to be training wheels. It's not a forever product. It's a product where if somebody is stuck like my Kathy or Eric, their metabolism is stuck, they need something to jumpstart that. Because exercise, if you can't move into fat burn easily, and fasting, you can't move into fat burn, it's torture. So this product was actually created to be the training wheels to get everything moving, like priming the pump, as they used to say, right? And by priming the pump, we can move a person into fat burn, and you with your Pnoe device can determine for each individual when they're there. And once they start to activate their metabolism, mitochondrial health goes up, mitochondrial biogenesis goes up, their energy levels go up, they probably don't need the product anymore. Because now with exercise, every time they exercise, they can activate AMPK. But what I saw with Kathy, as an example, and this is a really good one, she could literally run 5 miles in a day. And she does that. She's crazy. I can't do that. She would do that 5 miles in a day and not eat anything fast all day long. Her lumen would go from a 5 to a 3. And then the next morning, she'd wake up at a 5. With trim, without exercise, 2 servings, she goes from a 5 to a 1, and she wakes up the next morning in a 3. So at the end of the day, after a couple months of that, we've trained her metabolism. She's exercising, she's losing body fat, feeling better. Probably 1 serving of trim will do, and then probably in the future, no trim is necessary. So I built it to be training wheels to push the metabolic flexibility. The coolest thing is if you get a smart scale that measures body fat, water composition, and
Mm.
skeletal muscle, you'll see an improvement in lean skeletal muscle mass and a decrease in body fat when you take the product. So finally, and this is the tail end of the presentation, but it may be the most important part. We've got a product that's training wheels. But what we found is the product does not work well at all if the person continues to eat processed foods or junk foods. And
Mhm.
right now, your whole audience knows why. If you spike insulin, if you eat that jelly donut, blood glucose goes up, insulin goes up, and AMPK goes down. The product's
Mhm.
not strong enough to beat that. Insulin is always the bully on the playground. It's going to win. So I have to show people how to eat low glycemic so they can win with trim. We want to do that because a low glycemic diet basically just means we pulled all the processed foods out of the diet and now we're eating real food, like you see as an example on your screen. The benefit is a low glycemic antioxidant rich diet lowers insulin. That increases AMPK. That decreases inflammation. I'm doing the circle around the wheel. That increases insulin sensitivity. That decreases glucose and that lowers insulin. And now you have a positive feed forward loop. The cool thing that I can tell you is just eating low glycemic for 4 days creates a measure of improved insulin sensitivity that gets even stronger at 7 and keeps going all the way up and peaks at about 12 weeks. So every single day you stack on another day of eating low glycemic, your insulin levels come down and your insulin sensitivity goes up. I like to say, and I guarantee you, you know it's true, you can't supplement your way out of a lousy diet.
Say that every
You,
day.
Yep. You cannot eat junk food and then take trim and expect for it to work. It just won't. So you've got to eat a low glycemic diet. And probably to steal the thunder of everything I've said, this is the most important part because this is how people went off the rails ultimately. This is how people got high insulin is eating all the processed foods. So if you take them out, you basically win. So what is a low glycemic antioxidant rich diet? Top right-hand quadrant of your screen, this is lunch. It's paleo. All the vegetables you want, all the seeds and nuts that you want typically, all the berries that you want that are low glycemic, and a good healthy dressing on the salad, that would be lunch. By the way, though, it doesn't have to be paleo. It could be the Mediterranean diet, as long as there's no processed foods in it. And by the way, the Blue Zones diet, one thing they all had in common, none of them had processed foods. They were eating real food. So what am I
Mhm.
saying? Eat real food, right?
Yep.
No processed
Yep.
food, eat real food. Then for the grand
Mm.
finale, and this is the one I want you and I to hitchhike on together, exercise, the bottom left-hand quadrant of your screen. Now, I'm going to share something special. I always say to doctors, and I'm going to do this now, but I don't know how many people are going to see this, right? We don't know. But I would just say this for your audience. Shh, don't tell anybody this. That's what I say to doctors in my live lecture. Bottom left-hand quadrant of your screen. A single bout of high-intensity exercise, cycling and running, to exhaustion or near exhaustion increases whole body insulin sensitivity. Now, this perfectly dovetails with everything that I've seen you talk about. You say you think most people don't do high intensity interval training right, right?
Mhm.
Tell
Correct.
us more about that because that's exactly hidden in this sentence.
Mm.
You
Well,
have
that's
to go
what
to exhaustion.
exactly. And that's what I was sharing in that video I did yesterday, that so many people, especially if they're insulin resistant, they're not comfortable going all out.
Right.
And that's not most people's innate ability to go that hard. They're not comfortable going there. And I
Training
get a
wheels.
lot of people that are just going in between, that they're, like I said, they're in the zone 3. They're trying to work really hard, but they're just
Right.
doing that zone 3 workout instead.
Right. So here's the deal. A single bout of high intensity exercise, cycling, running to exhaustion or near exhaustion increases whole body insulin sensitivity. It's actually about complete ATP depletion, working
Mhm.
to fatigue, working to exhaustion. Doesn't matter what it is. Now, by the way, the more muscle groups you can engage at once, the better, which means jump squats would be perfect, right? But at the end of the day, a single bout. Now, I don't tell patients this because they'll do it. That's it, right? So I try to tell them 10 to 15 minutes of high intensity interval training per day. And then we define it like you do in your podcast. But at the end of the day, That way they get multiple bouts, if you will, in, right? It's not one, but they'll probably get 4 to 5 bouts in.
Got it.
But at the end of the
But
day, it's if you think about it, if your goal is insulin sensitivity, warming up really well, doing one
mm,
bout to exhaustion improves whole body insulin sensitivity. If you're eating right, that's improving insulin sensitivity. Without any product, pill, potion, or lotion, you're going to get to better AMPK and better insulin sensitivity just by doing those two things: low glycemic, antioxidant-rich diet and exercising to exhaustion.
so you're just saying doing one, say, sprint up the stairs and doing that throughout the day, 5 times is equal to doing it all at once, sprint and then recover
Well, in this case, I'm saying that if the goal is improving insulin sensitivity, it just takes one bout.
once.
But the
So one
bout
20
has,
second sprint.
yeah, the complete exhaustion. That ATP depletion sends a whole body AMPK signal that improves insulin sensitivity. That's ultimately where we got to AMPK, is doing it with intensity.
But
My
just
concern
to
is,
clarify, though, just to run in this thought, most people, as we said, aren't doing this is sprint interval training. So we're speaking zone 5, not zone 4
Mhm.
hit training that you do at Orange Theory or F45, whatever the different gyms,
Right.
right?
Yes,
So you're saying it has
correct.
to be all out high zone 5 and then recovery zone 1 for a couple minutes.
Yes, exactly. Patient or
Mm-hmm.
individual has to be healthy enough to do that, right? They need to
Mm-hmm.
get cleared by their doctor, and then they go completely to exhaustion. That's the absolute key for improving insulin sensitivity. So at the top right-hand quadrant of the screen, if that's visible, rapid
Yep.
ATP depletion is ultimately how this physiologically is working. The lactic acid building up, the ATP going diminished, sends a big AMPK signal that's almost like a warning or a reset of a circuit board in the human body to where AMPK now becomes dominant. Now, by the way, interestingly, if you look this up, AMPK and mTOR can go up at the same time if they do interval training correctly. They both can go up at the same time. Then, interestingly, AMPK will last for about 3 hours on its own as it trickles down. And then, if you get a person to eat right with the protein threshold, like you've mentioned, right, in just the
Mm-hmm.
last video, now you can stimulate mTOR in the evening, and you're going to have a beautiful balance between engaging and creating new lean skeletal muscle mass, which is what we all need as we age,
Mm-hmm.
and activating AMPK every day.
So most people, and I even myself, I don't have the energy to go all out to get it. Say 100, you can't track your heart rate because it's just short. But say I'm trying to get all out 170 heart rate or something. I have to be in ideal condition to have that energy and rested and get sleep and good mood. I mean, everything has to fall into place to really get to my zone 5. That doesn't happen very often.
And boy, is that the same for me too. Like if I have sleep deprivation, I can notice in a really strong way how weak my exercise is, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I'm completely rested, and slept really good, I can feel it just like you. But the key, I think, is the effort trying to get there. Do you know what I mean? That's going to be the
Mm-hmm.
effort. Now, back to the Panoe, you're going to discover, and I can't say it really enough. I'm saying that because this might be 3 times now in this talk, but you're going to discover individuals that aren't ready for this at all,
Yep.
as you know. And
Yep.
you're going to find people that are. It's really important, in my opinion, that you can dial in so you can serve everybody and help them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a big point that most people, and this is why I'm trying to get people to do metabolism testing, not focusing on the athlete. I really feel it's more important to get this test and this full assessment of your metabolic health, the functional lab blood work, PNOE test, and figure out where you are by testing and not guessing. For those are just health optimizers that might be struggling with fatigue or unexplained weight gain or inability to lose weight. I don't feel that we should just target or even target the high performing athlete. I think the people
Mm.
that need this information are the people that are struggling trying to get results, to feel their best, to live their best life, move well, all of that to improve their health in the future. And I think that's where the marketing goes wrong with VO2 max testing, that the people that really need it are completely intimidated by VO2 max and don't think, that's only for professional athletes. That's not me. But if you want to improve your future self and get this insulin level in optimal range, not normal, and really figure out what you need to do nutritionally and exercise and movement and sleep and stress, that holistic approach to thrive as you age, it's not the person that's already exercising. It's the person that doesn't really know what they should be doing and not doing
Right.
any of it.
Right. Couldn't agree with you more.
So
All right.
can
Do we
you
do we have
go on? Yeah.
do we have some time for some more goodies?
Yes, please. We've got like 15 minutes.
I got another goodie.
Oh,
Deep
my favorite.
rest.
I just was saying
I know
sleep.
you
I'm
hit this
good.
too. Deep restful sleep is a major key to insulin sensitivity and testosterone. Rhonda Patrick literally last week
Yep. I lost you there. There.
sensitivity by 25%.
Got it.
25%
Wow.
drop in insulin sensitivity. Interestingly, the most powerful way to improve deep sleep quality, deep sleep and REM sleep is boosting AMPK, which takes you out to the high intensity interval training. The effort of getting there to exhaustion, boosting AMPK, will actually significantly improve a person's ability to fall asleep that evening and stay in deep sleep. And here's the sweet spot. This is a study, not just me telling you my opinion. This is, again, me being the guide into the peer-reviewed research literature. Increasing AMPK activity is associated with improved sleep quality, as AMPK plays a role in regulating sleep balance,
Mm.
homeostasis. AMPK activity is associated with improved deep sleep, as AMPK acts as an energy sensor in the body, and its activation promotes restorative sleep by regulating energy levels within the brain, particularly during deep sleep stages characterized by deep delta wave activity. And the grand finale, AMPK
Mm.
is linked to the body's circadian clock, helping to regulate sleep-wake cycles. One of the reasons people have trouble falling asleep or staying asleep is the fact that their circadian clock is off and their body doesn't know when it's daytime and nighttime. You talk about first morning light on the eyes, right?
Mm-hmm.
That helps to reset the circadian clock, and AMPK helps to set the circadian clock. So you're tired at night. When you put your head on the pillow, you fall asleep and stay asleep. So even AMPK is our way to healthy sleep. Now, to review, the best way to get to AMPK is exercise. Any exercise is good, but intense exercise is the bell ringer for improving AMPK. You've got to eat a low glycemic, antioxidant rich diet to keep insulin level so AMPK will activate and work. And ultimately, polyphenol ingredients can help people speed up their ability to improve AMPK activation. So at the end of the day, I'm an AMPK absolute fan. That's why we send out this Reset 30 guide with the intention of showing people how to eat, how to exercise,
Mm.
and why that's so important to activate AMPK. Otherwise, an AMPK activating product just really won't work as good as it should.
Yeah.
So,
Talk about, yeah, go ahead.
so even sleep, isn't that a mind blower?
Mm-hmm. I say that all the time. I feel that most people need to figure out their sleep routine before anything else works.
Yep. Now I've heard you say that, and I think you're exactly right. But interestingly, you can get there. Well, you got to respect the sleep routine, that's for sure. But
Yeah.
you can get to better sleep by doing the intense exercise.
Yeah, the right time of day for it. And not wearing sunglasses at 7 in the morning. I always laugh at
Right.
these people walking with their hat on and sunglasses when it's just the sun's rising. But okay,
Right.
no. So, do you have more slides or is that it? Can I ask?
That is it. That's the grand
Okay,
finale.
amazing. Well, we'll put the links in the show notes if people have a question or want to order it. I can send them the link as I have my packet here. I've been drinking. But question that I keep talking about, as you probably know, versus the mTOR, because when we do metabolism testing, this is a video I did yesterday that you saw, that if we need to improve fat oxidation and mitochondrial health, increasing the AMPK pathway, so we're burning fat. But what if those people need to speed up their metabolism's slower than it should be? Is that saying we need both, right? AMPK and mTOR, and that when we should increase our metabolism by doing the strength training and the protein prioritization and hitting our protein goals throughout the day.
Oh, that is so important to top everything
Yeah.
off. The protein, the hitting that leucine threshold to help
Yeah.
stimulate um, motor and to lay down new healthy skeletal muscle
Okay,
mass. So
motor,
back to
mTOR.
what you actually said, it's like the Goldilocks, not too much, not too little, just right. The reality is these individuals like Eric and Kathy and most of the population have high insulin, so they already have overactive mTOR. So for
Mm-hmm.
a while, you really want to overactivate AMPK because that's
Okay.
going to access body fat. That's going to improve metabolic flexibility. Once they
Jumpstart.
can, once they can do that, they can fast and get the benefits of fasting, and that resets their metabolism. So in the beginning, metabolism will go up when AMPK goes up because it's going to improve resting metabolism and it's going to improve fat burn and metabolic flexibility. You want to counter that strong mTOR message by doing that. And when insulin comes down into the normal range, then you've got a dance. That's a beautiful dance where you've activated motor, you've activated AMPK. You've activated one, you've activated the other. They're
Mm-hmm.
both necessary. You want them up and down every day. You don't want motor stuck high all the time with insulin. So my point is, it has to do with testing the PNOE, maybe pulling fasting insulin to find out where the person really is.
Mm-hmm.
If insulin is high, you really can't push AMPK too much. You really can't. Now, that's not true forever. Remember, I said that the trim is like training wheels. It's not true forever, but it is true in the beginning. So an individual like Larry, who you did some testing on,
A
that guy
lot.
is completely stone crazy fit, right? Washboard abs, good looking guy. He's a specimen, the best healthy specimen at his age I've ever seen, I think, right?
Yeah,
So I would
69.
I would expect him to easily go into fat utilization and right back into carb utilization as he needs to, right? But
Mm-hmm.
Eric and Kathy, they were overweight in the beginning, right? Now, by the way, Eric's lost 60 pounds and my wife lost 53 pounds. So at the end of the day, they were significantly overweight. Just by looking at them, you knew insulin was high. At least now you do. So
Mm-hmm.
bringing insulin down now allows them to access motor and AMPK and activate both anytime. So when Eric exercised, and by the way, he's lost enough weight now that he's doing ski patrol again, which is pretty cool. He's really proud of that. He couldn't when he was 60 pounds heavier, as you could imagine, but he's now doing ski patrol again. Imagine the fat calories he's burning when he's on the slopes, is where I'm going. And then Kathy, she can now exercise, and without the product, I'll tell you, she can drop herself right into a 1 and right back like a normal person. So Trim was created to be training wheels to get a person into AMPK activation once they are more athletic by definition. Like many of the individuals that you work with, they probably don't need the product because they can move in and out of AMPK activation and mTOR activation as they need to. So the beautiful perfect package would be to represent now, talk about the protein threshold, how many grams it takes to do that leucine threshold. And I know that you mentioned that you take a separate product of essential amino acids too. Those really would be key to take in the evening
Mm-hmm.
to help to rebuild lean skeletal muscle.
Yeah, it's super hard to hit those protein goals.
It is.
I mean, I can't eat that much actually. And, I just got some Paleo Valley fermented beef stick I brought with me to my mom's here. And it's like, that's 7 grams. That's not doing anything for my muscle protein synthesis. And so it's really what I said in the intro before you came on the show, that you have to plan ahead your nutrition and figure out your meal timing and your goals. But with all that, I always talk about chronic stress impacts everything, and we just have a few minutes left. But just how you're talking about testosterone and cortisol and estrogen, what would you kind of wrap up all this with the impact on balancing our hormones as we age?
Okay,
Which
so this
part
is going to
two
be
video I can tell needs to be done.
this is maybe I should have covered this earlier because this is the coolest part. When you bring insulin down, insulin opposes testosterone, and you bring cortisol down, you can restore a man's testosterone.
Mm-hmm.
So what I found is it doesn't matter if they're 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years of age. It doesn't seem like there's a limit on that. Their body will and can make testosterone like they were 20, meaning they can maintain technically 750 nanograms per deciliter, which is what a typical 25 to 30-year-old male, if he's healthy, has for testosterone. This loss of testosterone is common, but it's not normal. And unfortunately, in our country, we call a lot of things that are common normal. They're not, right?
Yeah.
Just like it's
Hate the
common
word. Normal is a
for
bad
people to
word.
be
It's not a
overweight,
good thing.
right? Yeah. So at the end of the day, that's men and testosterone. So if you fix the cortisol problem And if you fix the insulin problem, you're going to restore healthy testosterone. And that's
Mm,
what the Testosterone Switch book is all about.
okay.
In women, interestingly, menopause symptoms are directly connected to hyperinsulinemia, too much insulin in the blood. So to the degree a woman is having trouble with night sweats, hot flashes, achy bones and joints, inflammation, all the things that seem to accompany individuals that have a poor menopausal response, if you bring insulin down, interestingly, all those menopausal symptoms go away. They are all linked to high insulin. So earlier, when I said insulin's a bully on the playground, it will disrupt men's hormones and women's hormones. And to the degree you can bring it down, you can fix those problems in both men and women.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
I
think of this.
can tell we need a follow up on this because this is
Yeah,
an hour
that's a good
itself.
one. Well, I'm a lot better with the men than I am with the women, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
But
no, men, we need more men on testosterone. Everyone always wants to talk about estrogen. Like, half my listeners are men. They don't want to hear about women's estrogen hormones all the time.
yeah,
They need
but
more attention.
the key is balancing insulin again. So if you
Mhm.
have 10 women and 5 of them or 6 or 7 of them have really bad menopausal symptoms and you notice 3 don't at all, oh, they went right through it with no problem. The difference is insulin sensitivity
Mhm.
and the insulin levels. And interestingly, I can tell you as a clinician, you can almost always tell if a person has high insulin or not, but it's not completely accurate. About 80% of the time, if they're overweight, like a man with a beer belly and lots of love handles, if he's sitting in
Man
front of you like
boobs.
that, and what?
I was going to say man boobs too, but that's more.
Man, okay.
Yeah.
You're at an 80% chance of high insulin and usually really
Mm,
high. But interestingly, 20% of the time, he can be normal in the insulin category. The opposite
mm.
can be true. The guy that's completely fit and healthy, looking all strapping, 20% of the time he can have high estrogen. Sorry, high insulin. So at the end of the day, you're right. 80% of the time you're right. You look at that guy, you say it's insulin's normal, it is, but 20% it can be high. So if you have an elderly person in front of you that's a male or female, just because they're skinny doesn't mean their sugar metabolism is normal at all, and or their
Hmm.
insulin metabolism.
Well, I think this is great information. Hopefully, people are motivated to get their labs done. And, we said direct labs, or you can use Alta Labs and get a practitioner to work with you and get metabolism testing and figure out what you have going on now. Where are you on your health journey and figure out what is best for you by testing and not guessing. As I say, you don't know what you don't know. So, really figure out those hidden pieces that the doctor's not testing in your annual checkup. You have
Mm-hmm.
to take ownership and do it yourself, sadly. So thank you. I'll put all the links in the show notes. So anything you want me to add, send over to me later. But I love learning and I do want to do a follow-up because I'm really into this cognitive health. We've been talking to Martha Carlin and Dr. William Davis. We've done some episodes on cognitive decline and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. And I think this would correlate too with it too. So I'm just interested in whatever we can do today to be our best self in the future. And I think that as your sign behind you says, better body, brighter mind. It's
Well,
what we need to do.
I'd love to be a part of that. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for your time today. Great information. Hopefully, you guys watch the video so you get the slides, and we'll put all the links in the show notes.